Welcome back. It seems like every new student has questions about chords, and most people don't understand exactly what they are, but they think that they're probably important, and some people use chords and some people don't, which is a lie. Everybody uses chords. But there's triads, and there's seventh chords, and there's extensions, and all kinds of crazy stuff. Today, we're going to go over all of it, from triads to seventh chords, extensions. I'm going to go over the quick and easy way that you don't need any theory for, so you can get a cheat sheet on each of the different types of chords, or we're also going to dive into the deep theory behind all of this. So whether you are writing your own songs, or you're trying to reharmonize someone else's song, or you just enjoy learning about theory, whatever your case is, we're going to hopefully answer all the questions that you have. I'm going to answer all the questions I've gotten in the last 20 years of teaching. Let's get into it. Okay, so first of all, the very most basic thing about chords is just that there's more than one note being played at a time. So if you've got that going on, or that isn't a chord yet. If you have two notes, we could call that one like a harmony or something, but it's probably not a chord yet. Once you get that third note in there, regardless of what the third note is, these are all types of chords. Any three or more notes being played at the same time, you're playing some type of chord. The most basic type of chord there is a major chord. So to find a major chord, you're just going to play the root. The root's just another name for the name of the chord. So if we're playing a C major chord, then C is the root. If we're playing an E flat major chord, E flat would be the root. So on a C major chord, then C would be the root. And then you're just going to go up 4 half steps, 4 semitones, 4 little notches away from there. So we'd go from here, 1, 2, 3, 4. Each of those was a half step. So those are the first 2 notes of the C major chord. And then after that, we're going to go up 3 half steps, 1, 2, 3. If you take your root and you add 4 half steps to it, and then you add 3 half steps to it, that is a major chord. Whatever the root is the name of the chord. So this is a C major chord because we followed the pattern for a major chord, root plus 4 plus 3, and we also started on C. Therefore, it's a C major chord. The other example that we have here is an E major chord. So we just start on an E, go up 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then go up 3, 1, 2, 3. That is an E major chord, major because we followed the pattern of root plus 4 plus 3, and E because we started on E. So that's an E major chord that works on any note that you start on. So from there, we're going to go to a minor chord. There's a couple different ways to come up with a minor chord. A minor chord, by the way, could be either it'll say minor, or it'll say just a little M, or it'll say a minus, or they might spell out part of the word. There's all kinds of ways to say minor. But a D minor chord, for example, would be just starting on D. And I'm trying to just choose random notes to start on here so that you don't get the idea that it all has to be based on C. But most examples that you'll see online are based on C. But let's start on D. Might as well. So from the D, from the root, we're going to go up 3 half steps. 1, 2, 3. And then up 4 half steps. 1, 2, 3, 4. That right there is a D minor chord. D because we started on D, and minor because we followed the pattern of root plus 3 plus 4. Whenever you follow the pattern of root plus 3 plus 4, you'll get a minor chord. Now, let me also point out here that if we were going to play a D major chord, it'd be root plus 1, 2, 3, 4 plus 1, 2, 3. That's a major chord, a D major chord. A D minor chord is this: major, minor, major, minor. So the difference between the major chord and the minor usually happens in that middle note there, the one after the root. If it's a little bit higher, it's going to be major. If it's a little bit lower, it's going to be minor. Also, you'll hear online a lot that like major chords sound happy, which in general they do. And minor chords sound sad, which in general they do. And eventually, with some ear training, you'll be able to pick out the difference between major chords and minor chords and all the other types of chords. But most importantly, it's not the sadness or happiness that makes it major or minor. It is the pattern that you follow. So root plus 4 plus 3, that's a major chord. Root plus 3 plus 4 is a minor chord, regardless of how it makes you feel inside. And now there are really only two types of chords left, augmented and diminished. We've already done major and minor, and those are by far the most common types of chords. After that, you might run into an augmented or a diminished chord every now and then, but it's entirely possible that you could play tons of songs without running into any augmented or diminished chords at all. So these are kind of extra. But augmented can either be signified with a plus sign, or sometimes it'll say sharp 5. Those mean the same exact thing. They mean augmented. And all we're going to do is let's start on D again. We'll go D, that's our root, and then we're gonna go +4, just like we did for the major chord. And then we're gonna go, instead of +3, we're gonna go +4 again. 1, 2, 3, 4. That sounds totally terrible, and it's absolutely right. That is a D augmented chord. D because D was the root, we started on a D, and augmented because, not because it sounded terrible, but because we followed the pattern of root +4 +4. So you'll notice that all these chords start like kind of looking similar. So we had like the D major chord, the D minor chord, the D major chord, the D augmented. They're all pretty closely related, even though they each have their own very distinct sound and their own distinct quality to them. So that's a D augmented chord. D +4 +4 makes D augmented. And last, we have the diminished chord, which is also going to sound super weird, but it's kind of the opposite of the augmented chord, where the augmented chord, we used all the largest numbers possible, root +4 +4. This one is going to use the 3 twice in a row, so it's going to be the smallest chord possible. Root +1 2 3 +1 2 3. This would be a D diminished chord. D because D is the root, that's the one we started on, and diminished because we followed the pattern of root +3 +3. You'll notice it sounds kind of like really suspenseful, but also just kind of weird. So the augmented sound and the diminished sound are both like really unique, very strong flavors to those, which is why they don't get used that often, because they're just so noticeable in a song. Also note that on a diminished chord, there's tons of different ways to say diminished when you're trying to write it out. So you could write out the word diminished, or write out part of the word diminished, or just put a circle, or a circle with a line through it. That's more important once we get to the 7th chords. Or you could have a little m with a flat 5. M, then lowercase b5, which means minor with a flat 5. Let me show you that real quick. Let me show you why that's the case. Let's go to this example here, the F. So the F major chord, let's go back a little bit. Root +1 2 3 4 +1 2 3. This is an F major chord. Cool. If we take the F major chord and we lower that middle note, we'd always come up with a minor chord, because if you take major and you take that second note and you lower it, that's going to be minor. And then if you take this note right here and you lower that one, well, it's like a minor chord, except that top note there, which is called the 5, we'll talk about that in a minute. You lower that 5, now it's a minor chord with a lowered or a flat 5. So minor flat 5 is the same thing as diminished. It's also important to note that you can put these notes in any order that you want. So once you've found your chord, let's say a C major chord, for example, the very first one that we found, it was built on C. C +1 2 3 4 +1 2 3. A C and an E and a G is a C chord, a C major chord, regardless of where you play it. So if you play it there, or there, or there, these are all just different places that we can play C and E and G. And you don't even have to play them in that order. You can play C and E and G. This is still a C major chord because C and E and G all together are a C major chord regardless of how you play it. So that right there is a C major chord. That right there is a C major chord. That right there is a C major chord. As long as you're including just C's and E's and G's, it's a C major chord. So this leads us to inversions. In most cases, when you're playing a C chord up here, your left hand or your bass player, when you're playing by yourself, your left hand basically is your bass player, is going to play the root of the chord. So if you're playing a C up here, you'll usually have a C down here in your left hand. But there are occasions where we would have the lowest note not be a C. So for example, this one right here, C chord, regular, plain, cool. Everybody's happy. If we take this note right here and we put it on top, it's still a C, E, G, so it's still a C major chord, but now C is not the lowest note anymore. Now the E the 3 of the chord. We'll get to those numbers in a second. Seems like those are getting important. The 3 of the chord is now the lowest note of the chord that we're playing. This is called first inversion. So this is root position, where the root is on the bottom. If we take the root and we put it on top, now we have first inversion, where the 3 is on the bottom. Now if we take the 3 and we put it on top, now this is second inversion, where the 5 of the chord is on the bottom. If we take the 5 and put it on top, it seems like that should be third inversion, unless you look at it again, you realize, oh, that's just root position again, because the root is now back on the bottom. So that's root position, first inversion, second inversion. Now here's a little secret I'm not supposed to tell you yet. Even though almost 100% of piano books are going to teach you root, first inversion, second inversion, back to root, all we really care about is the lowest note. So like I was saying before, if you're playing this, that one right there should be your left hand note. The root of the chord should be the lowest thing. Well, this is root position. But if I just change what the lowest note is in my left hand, watch this. Now I'm playing the 3 of the chord as the lowest note. This officially, technically, even though it looks like it's in root position, this is actually first inversion, because the lowest note that you're hearing is the 3 of the chord. So it's not always based on what your right hand is doing. What really matters is what the lowest note is. Now, some people would call C over E a slash chord. They go C/E, but it's not really a true slash chord, because this note that I'm playing down here is in the chord. So this is really just an inversion. You already know that. If I play that, that's a C chord in root position. If I play that, that's a C chord in first inversion. If I play that, that's a C chord in second inversion. I really haven't done anything too fancy yet, because all of those notes that I played are in the chord. However, if I play this note right here, this note is not in the chord. This actually is a legitimate slash chord, because the lowest note that I'm playing is not a note that is in the chord. I know that sounds kind of weird, huh? C over D. That's a slash chord. That's just an inversion. That's super weird. You'd probably run into this sound, by the way, if you were like in the key of G. So if you had... It doesn't always sound weird. Let's move on. The next page here is just a cheat sheet for every single triad, in case that stuff just went over your head, or if it just seemed way too boring, now you can just look up any of the chords that you want. So if you are looking for, let's say, a D major chord, you could just go to the major column here, find D, and find that the notes for a D major chord are supposed to be D, and F sharp, and A. You don't have to follow the patterns. You can just use the cheat sheet. So if you wanted, I don't know, pick something ridiculous, an A flat augmented chord, that would be these guys right here. If you go A flat, C, E, that's your A flat augmented chords. So you don't have to follow the patterns or memorize any of those. You can just carry this cheat sheet with you if you want, and that'll give you all of the 3-note chords that there are on the piano. By the way, a 3-note chord is called a triad. So not all chords have 3 notes. Sometimes you have 4 notes. Now, let me point out here that even if you have 4 notes, it's not necessarily some big complex chord. This and this is still just a triad, because we just have 3 unique letters, C and E and G. Even though I'm playing 6 notes, it's really a 3-note chord. Hopefully that makes sense. However, in that other example where I had C and I had another D in there, right? This is a 4-note chord right here, and it's not just 3 notes with something repeated. This is actually unique. This right here, this is unique. So now we're dealing with 7th chords. This is how we come up with the numbers. This was the 1, this was the 3, that was the 5, which is terribly confusing. Everyone wants to call that the 1, they want to call that one the 2, and they want to call that one the 3. The problem is, once we start getting into extensions, we got to add in these notes sometimes. What about when we play that one? What do we call that one? Well, we already called that one a 1 and that one a 2, so that'd be like a 1.5. No, so we got to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And it actually goes past that. 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, and then after that, Once we get to 15, we actually are back to the root again. So there's no 15. It just goes up through 13, all of your odd numbers. 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, 11, 13. That's too much to worry about for right now. Let's just deal with 1, 3, 5, and 7. Now, as you already know, there's 4 types of main chords, 4 types of triads. We've got major chords, we've got minor chords, we've got diminished chords, and we've got augmented chords. Now, we can put a 7 on top of any of those because that's different ways to arrange the 1, the 3, and the 5. Major, minor, diminished, and augmented. So we could have a major chord, for example, that has this 7 in it right here. This 7 is the 7 that is a half step away from the root. So if we go up here, that's the root. That's a half step away from the root. So that's what we'd call a major 7 right there. Or we could play this 7 right here, which is the lowered 7. In the same way that we could, on our triads, we could lower or raise the 3. And on the 5, we could raise or lower the 5. We can raise or lower the 7. So now we have a lot more options. For the major chord, we've got 2 options. A major 7 chord, which means major triad with the raised version of the 7, the one that's only a half step away from the root. Or we've got a dominant or 7 chord. If you just see a C7, that means it's a major triad with a lowered 7. So just the number 7 means this chord right here, which is also known as dominant. Major triad, lowered 7. These also have formulas for them just like the triads did. So if you go root plus 4 plus 3 plus 3, that's always going to be a dominant chord. If you go root plus 4 plus 3 plus 4, that's always going to be a major 7 chord. But now we're getting into a lot of formulas to remember. It's easier for me to just remember the major 7 is the one that's a half step away from the root. The lowered 7 is the one that's a whole step away from the root. Now you can also have 2 different types of 7s on a minor chord. So based on a minor chord right here, C minor, we could have this one right here, which is a super cool sound, like a mystery novel or something like that. So we've got the minor triad with a raised 7, a major 7. So that would be called minor major 7. This is C minor major 7. Or if we lower the 7 on a minor chord, this is just called a minor 7, a C minor 7, or C minus 7, just means minor triad with a lowered 7. And if you thought the diminished and augmented chords were weird before, once we start throwing these 7s on here, now it gets really crazy. So the diminished chords, this is a C diminished chord. I told you before there are 2 types of 7s. There's actually 3. So there's a major 7 like that one right there. But what we're going to use for the diminished chords is the lowered 7. If we have a diminished chord here with a lowered 7, a regular lowered 7, whole step away from the root, this is called half diminished. So it's a diminished triad with a regular dominant 7 on there. That's a half diminished, and that's where that circle with a line through it comes in. If you have something that looks like that right there, that is our half diminished symbol. It means diminished triad with a regular lowered 7. But if you wanted a fully diminished, that's where you'd have the circle with no line through it, and that means that you're going to have a doubly lowered 7. So this was the lowered 7. This is the diminished 7. So the formula for this is root plus 3 plus 3 plus 3. And we call this a symmetrical chord because if you went up another 3, you'd be back to your root again. So root plus 3 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 plus 3. This is a diminished chord. Diminished because we follow the pattern, fully diminished because we follow the pattern of root plus 3 plus 3 plus 3, and C because C was the root. A C fully diminished chord. C half diminished, C fully diminished. Once we go to augmented chords, these are actually less common than even the diminished ones, but the 7s are just regular now. So we've got a regular, weird sounding C augmented chord. We could either have C augmented with a major 7 or just a C augmented 7. If you couldn't tell yet, whenever we just say 7, we're always referring to the lowered 7, the one that's a whole step away from the root. So just saying 7 usually implies that the 7 is lowered unless you specifically say major 7, you're talking about the raised 7. So C augmented major 7, C augmented, 7. And that's all the 7 chords. And yes, we have a cheat sheet for the 7th chords too. This one is a little bit more complex because there's different types of chords now, but we have the major 7, which could also be MAJ7 or sometimes just a triangle. A triangle by itself means major 7. Then you could have the minor major 7, which could be a little m, sometimes with a line over it, and then a big M, and then a 7. Or sometimes instead of this big M, we would have a triangle, because triangle always means major 7. Or you could have the minor 7, which could be written like this, or like this, or like this. You could have the dominant 7, which sometimes we would just say dom or dominant, and then sometimes it just says the 7. If it's just a 7 by itself, that means lowered 7, major triad. Fully diminished is just that circle like we talked about, and the half diminished is the circle with the line through it. And just like before, if you just follow the cheat sheet, then it will give you all the answers for all the chords you could possibly want. If you want a B flat half diminished chord, you go to B flat and then go over to the half diminished column, and sure enough, it will spell it out for you there. Now we do have something called enharmonic equivalence. Occasionally, we will, because of the way that music theory works, that we're not going to get entirely into right now, you'll have to call a note something weird. For example, this note right here, in this case, could be called an E, like I put in parentheses, or the technically correct term in this case would be F flat, because F is right there, and if we flat an F, there's no black note right there, so we just go to the next one a half step down. This note could be considered an F flat, or the easier one is going to be an E. So in all the cases where we have really weird notes like that and harmonic equivalence, then I'm just going to put the easy version in parentheses, and then the technically correct version will be right above that. And congratulations, you already know probably everything that you're going to need to know for chords for 99% of the songs that you're ever going to run into, and you can fake your way through the rest of them. So you already know way more than most people know about chords. The rest of it is just icing on the cake. Really complicated music theory icing. Sounds like it would taste bitter. Let's jump in and see what we got here. So I told you before that we have the 1, the 3, the 5, the 7, the 9, the 11, and the 13. And as you might have guessed, all of these have variations on them, alterations to them as well. So for example, on your 9, you could have a raised 9, or you could have a regular 9, or you could have a flat 9, you could have an 11, or you could have a sharp 11, or you could have a 13, or you could have a flat 13. Now real quick before we get into the specifics of all the alterations for all of the extensions, I do need to throw in here a little thing about diatonic triads. So this is especially important if you're doing songwriting stuff, but it will also apply to all your reharmonizations and all that other stuff too. So when we're playing a chord, for example, C, the C major chord is in the key of C. So we're gonna start talking about keys and scales and stuff here. If you don't know anything about keys or scales, then you can either go look that stuff up or just wait, we'll be done soon. But when we're in the key of C, that means we're using all white notes. So you could already tell just by looking at the chord, well, that chord, even though it's a big funky chord with the extensions on it and stuff, that one is inside the key of C because I'm not playing any black notes. So that one is what we would call a diatonic chord. This one right here, that's a diatonic chord. That's a diatonic chord. This one's, all these chords are in the key of C. However, this chord right here, that's not in the key of C because it obviously goes outside of the key. So whatever key you're in most cases, you're gonna wanna keep all of the chords inside of the key. So for the C scale, a C major 7 chord is inside of the key. That's a chord that you commonly use in the key of C. This chord right here is not inside of the key of C, so you probably wouldn't use a C7 very frequently in the key of C at all. You could use a D minor 7 because that's going to stay inside the key. You could use an E minor 7. You could use an F major 7. You could use a G dominant. You could use an A minor 7 or a B half diminished. Those are the diatonic chords that have 7s in them for the key of C, and it works out to be the exact same set of chords in every single key. So for the key of C, the 1 chord is a major 7, but in every single key, the 1 chord, the chord that's built on the first note of the scale, that's always going to be a major 7. The 2 chord, the chord that is built on the second note in the scale, is always going to be a minor 7. 3 is going to be minor 7. 4 is going to be major 7. 5 is the only place we're going to have a dominant chord in a major scale. The 6 is always going to be minor 7, and the 7 is always going to be half diminished, whether you're in the key of C or G flat or A or B flat or anything else. Hey, Jamin, do you have a cheat sheet for that? Well, as a matter of fact, I do. The next page here on your PDF is the cheat sheet for all of the diatonic chords in every major key. Let me show you what this means here real quick, because we got a lot of headers up there. So the very first one is a 1 chord. In the key of C, the 1 chord is going to be a C chord. What about the 7? What is the 7 on a 1 chord in the key of C? Well, that would be a major 7. The chord, the triad, is going to be a major, and if you want to like write this in fancy classical notation, it would be a Roman numeral 1. So that's what all those headings are for there. So in the key of C, if you wanted a 3 chord, for example, it would be an E minor chord, because the chord quality is always going to be minor. It would be a lowercase 3. It's the 3 chord, and it's always going to be a minor 7. So this gives you all the chord qualities, both for the triads and for the 7th chords of every single key. So if you're in the key of, let's pick a random one here, the key of B. Well, the common chords for the key of B are going to be B, C sharp minor, D sharp minor, E, F sharp, G sharp minor, and A sharp, half diminished. There you go. There's your cheat sheet for all the diatonic chords for every single key, major and, if you want, minor as well. And our last little chart before we wrap things up here is this one right here. This is going to tell you exactly what the formula is for pretty much every chord that you could possibly run into. Little key here, a little legend here is going to be this lowercase b is like the computer way of making a flat symbol. So if you see a lowercase b, that usually means that the person was trying to make a flat symbol, but their computer just wouldn't flatten out the bottom part of that lowercase b. So instead, you end up with a lowercase b. So that usually means flat. As we already discussed before, a big M means major, sometimes just M-A-J, or the triangle also means major. The circle with the line through it means half diminished, and minor has all kinds of stuff. It could be just a minus sign like that one. It could be a little m like that. It could be a little m with a line over it like that. Sometimes it'll just be M-I-N. Sometimes it'll be all of minor. There's lots of different ways to indicate something is minor. Fully diminished is that circle, or if it's just a triad, we're not talking about the 7. So, for example, in that C fully diminished chord, C half diminished, if it's just a circle, that means just either fully diminished or just the regular diminished triad, not adding in that 4th note in the chord. The hashtag symbol is a sharp, also known as a pound sign for old people who used to use things called telephones. And then last but not least, you do need to note that the plus sign means augmented. It does not mean add. So there are chords that will say like C add 9, and that means play a C and just literally add a 9. Don't put in any of the other extensions that could be in there. Just C add 9. So add is not the same thing as the plus symbol in music. The plus symbol means raised or augmented. And here's how we're going to read this whole cheat sheet here. Whatever your chord is, I've put all of these symbols in red, and I just put a C before each of the symbols so we could have an example of one of the chords. I told you everyone uses C as the example, but if you just have a chord, it just says C, or it just says D, or it just says E flat. If it's just a note on the piano, then that chord is going to be a major chord, and the formula is going to be, as we already discussed, root plus 4 plus 3. That's not really news to you, but I figured I'd throw them in the entire worksheet here that has all of the chords listed. So you already know minor, which is the minus sign or the lowercase m, or the lowercase m with a line over it. That's root plus 3 plus 4. The example that we would give here is C and an E flat and a G being played all at the same time, of course, in any order because of inversions. And then the scale numbers in the scale would be, in the C major scale, if you want a C minor chord, it would be a 1. and a flat 3, because that would be the 3. 1, flat 3, and 5 make up the minor chord. So that's what each of those columns means. A C sus 2 or a C sus 9 is going to be a root plus 2 plus 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That right there would be a C sus 9 or a C sus 2. You probably already know the 9 is the same thing as the 2. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. That D is a 2. So sometimes with the 9, they can put either one, the 2 or the 9. Then we have a C add 9, which is just like we talked about before, basically the chord with a 9 added in, or sometimes the 9 would get added in right there. So we could go root plus 2 plus 2 plus 3, and that would get us a C, a D, an E, and a G. And of course, you could put this D wherever you want. That looks more like a C add 9 to me, and that looks more like a C add 2, but it's the exact same set of notes. Then next on the list, we have C sus 4. So anything sus 4. By the way, sus just means suspended. In most cases, if you have a sus chord, it means that one of the notes in there, whatever it is that is suspended, is about to change to one of the regular notes. So in a C sus 2, for example, we had these notes right here. The note we don't have in here is that 3. So in most cases, a C sus 2 is about to move to a C chord. In the same way that a C sus 4, which is root plus 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, plus 2, that one right there, we're missing. That note right there is pretty obviously, glaringly missing. So we're probably about to go to the regular chord if you see sus. That's not always the case, but it's a pretty good rule of thumb. C5, if you just see a 5 after a note, you're going to see this, I think, mostly in pop music. It just means that you're going to have the chord without the middle note. It's just the 1 and the 5 of the chord. So it would be a root plus 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, which is the same thing as root plus 1, 2, 3, 4, plus 1, 2, 3 without the middle note there. So it's just the 1 and the 5. A C plus 5 or a C plus or plus 5 just means raise that 5 there. So it's going to be a root plus 4 like we talked about before. It's just an augmented chord. A 6 chord is just a regular chord, adding in a 6. And of course, that's the formula for a major chord. And then adding 2 after that, root plus 4 plus 3 plus 2 would get us the 6. A C minor 6 is just a C minor chord with a 6 added in. And somewhere in here, you start to feel like, oh, so if I just know my major and my minor chords, and maybe my diminished or my augmented chords as well, then I can just add in whatever numbers they say. So yeah, C minor 6 is just a C minor with the 6 in there. And then the C7 we already talked about is a major triad with a lowered 7. C minor 7, we already talked about that one as well. C major 7, and then C minor major 7, which has got that really cool sound. It's a C minor with a major 7. And for all of these, the symbols may be exchanged around just like we talked about at the top of the page. So this might say something like C minor major 7. That would mean the exact same thing as C minus, in parentheses, delta 7. That means C minor major 7. Exact same thing. Then we've got all the formulas for the fully diminished, the minor 7 flat 5, just like we talked about before, which is the same exact thing as a half diminished. Half diminished is just a faster way of saying minor 7 flat 5. We've got the C7 flat 9 or the C flat 9. If you just see a C flat 9, it's almost for sure that you can include the lower extension. In fact, that's probably true for most of the chords. If you see some really high number, you can probably add in all of the odd numbers down below that. So if you see a 9, it's probably pretty safe to add in your 7 as well. Then C7 sharp 9 is going to be C7 sharp 9, and we've got all the formulas for all of that and the examples and the note names there. Last couple here are going to be a C major 13 and a C13 sharp 11. So that's going to be your C, that's going to be your 13, that's your 11, that's your sharp. I think if you just learn your majors, your minors, for C and the other 11 chords that there are. So D flat major, D flat minor, D major, D minor, E flat major, E flat minor. This is starting to feel depressing. There's 12 chords you'll need to know. C, D flat, D, E flat, E, F, G flat, G, A flat, A, B flat, B, and it's over. And you know all of the chords you'll need to know from here until forever.
And beyond.
So get to know your major and minor chords, and then aside from that, it's just a matter of throwing extensions on the top. And I think that really is all there is to know about chords. After that, I mean, there's voicings, there's arpeggios, there's different ways to play those notes. So for a C chord, yeah, I could play that, or I could play that, or I could play that, or I could play that. There's different ways to go about playing it. That's called voicing, which notes you choose to include and which ones you choose to exclude while you're actually playing the chord. But as far as understanding how the chord is built, I think you've got all the tools. If I mentioned some stuff in there that didn't make sense, like the circle of fifths or writing songs or anything like that, then you can go check out the other workshops or just let me know, and I'll be happy to respond to you. And of course, it really helps if you subscribe and you like the stuff, you comment on it, share it. I don't know what else you could do. Just send me money. That'd be cool too. But anyway, let me know what questions you still have about chords. Until next time, good luck and have fun.